Okay, so in order to deal with parallel and perpendicular lines, we do this with this chapter because it deals with point slope form, slope intercept form, and standard form. In order to tell if lines are parallel or perpendicular, you're going to need to know their slope. Let me say that again. In order to tell if lines are parallel and perpendicular, you're going to need to know their slope. So we're going to go through and talk about what a line makes a line parallel and the symbol and what the slope has to be in order to be parallel. So here we go. It is going to be two lines that never intersect. They never cross each other, guys. In the same plane. There is another type of definition, another type of lines that never touch each other, but they go like this. Just so you know, you're going to need to learn this in geometry next year. These are called skew lines. They don't touch each other, but they obviously don't run the same direction. Parallel lines go the same direction in the same flat surface. For example, if you look at the ceiling, there are tons of parallel lines going down the ceiling, separating those tiles. The blinds, there's tons of parallel lines in these blinds. On the floor, the tiles, between them, there's tons of parallel lines. The symbol for parallel is going to be the two lines next to each other, straight up and down, that look like the L's in the word parallel, like two parallel lines. And if two equations were written here, it'd be like y equals, and let's say we had negative 2/3 x plus 4. Take a second to write that one. And then if we wanted a line parallel to that, it would be y equals negative 2/3 x, let's say minus 7. Okay, so what makes them parallel? If those two lines are parallel, what makes them parallel? The slope. What about the slope? It's the exact same. In order for lines to be parallel, the key is that they must have the same slope. That's it, guys. They have to have the exact same slope. The y-intercept does not matter. All that means is that the line crosses the y-axis at a different point. If you had these two lines, you might have it look like this, and then another one down here. Okay? They're still parallel. They just hit at different points along the y-axis. That number does not make any difference on whether they're parallel. The only number that matters is the slope. So, one of the questions they're going to ask you is, if you start with a slope of negative 4, then a line parallel to it is going to have a slope of what? Negative 4. It's got to be the exact same. So if you start with a slope of 3/7 and you want the lines to be parallel, the new slope will be what?
3/7.
Perfect. And then if it starts with 0, before we even talk about what it's got to be, guys, what kind of line would a slope of 0 mean you've got? Hoi. And if you have one hoi line and you want them to be parallel, you've got to have another hoi line, which means the slope has also got to be 0. Guys, if you have two vertical lines, two Vux lines, they're going to run parallel to each other. If you have two hoi lines, they're going to run parallel to each other. Questions, concerns, just on the concept of the idea that the slopes have to be the same. Okay, let's do a problem. Here's what it's going to look like on your homework tonight. So, we've got slope-intercept form of the line going through this point and parallel to this line. Guys, if it's parallel to this line, what's the only thing I care about in that equation? What makes lines parallel?
1/2 x.
So, what? No x. Don't get the x, but yes, the 1/2. Just be careful because the slope does not have any variables in it. So it's the 1/2. So, in order for it to be parallel, if the slope here is 1/2, then the slope of the new one's also got to be 1/2. So I'm going to use this slope and this point, guys. Do you understand this part of it from here down? This is actually stuff from your last test. If you have a point and a slope, what form are you going to write it in? Point slope form. Here we go. Point slope form. Y, since this is a negative 2, when you plug it in, it's going to be plus 2 equals our slope right here of 1/2 And then on the other side, it's going to be x. And since the 4 is positive, when I write it in the problem, it's going to be negative. Is that my answer? Read the problem and see if that's my answer.
No.
No, because it says what? Because it says it has to be in slope-intercept form, I know that I have to solve that. So we're going to multiply across. We're going to make this y plus 2 equals 1/2 x minus, because a positive times a negative is a negative, and then guys, what's half of 4? 2. It is negative 2, but it's 2. We had already dealt with the negative, but you're correct. It's not wrong. It is negative 2. So we write it as minus 2. If you've got your homework, bring it up. It's already flipped it. Okay, guys. So from there, what's keeping it from being slope-intercept form? The 2. How do we get rid of this 2 and make it go to the other side?
Minus.
Both those are correct. Minus or subtract, doesn't matter, guys. Y equals 1/2 x minus 4. This is a line that would be what to this line? Parallel. How do you know they're parallel? Because they have the same slopes. Anybody have any questions just on the very first one? Taking a little slower, just making sure you got it. Get a chance to answer your questions. This is half your test, guys. This one concept is half your, so you've got to ask me questions on it. Alright? The nice thing is, y'all, do you see that all of the work part of it is actually old stuff from the test that y'all just got done with? So that's not new. Okay, here we go. Next one, perpendicular lines. Perpendicular lines are going to be 2 lines that intersect to form right angles. To form right angles. Two lines that intersect to form right angles. Hey guys, what's a right angle?
90 degrees.
90 degrees. So 90-degree angles, guys, it's basically going to be like the x and y axis. You know how you have an x and y axis? They go like this. This is the x-axis, this is the y-axis. They form at right angles. They're perpendicular to each other. It's like the tiles on the floor. See how the lines all cross each other? These all cross each other at right angles. This is all going to be that. Does anybody know the symbol for perpendicular? It's not what you think, because you can't use a plus sign because it's plus sign. You can't use an x because it looks like a variable. Does anybody know what it is? Huh? No, it represents the y-intercept. There just can't be p because that stands for perimeter. It's actually someone's drawing it. I saw that. Yeah, it's an upside down capital T. Why? Because it's the only thing with right angles in it that hasn't been used for something else. It's also, guys, when you see it in a triangle, when you have a line that's perpendicular, it's called a perpendicular bisector. They look like that. It looks like the perpendicular bisector inside of a triangle. Okay? Okay, in order to have perpendicular lines, you're going to have this. Y equals, what was it before? Negative 2/3?
Mm-hmm.
We're going to do negative 2/3 x. What was it at the end? Plus 4. I'm just trying to stay with the same thing. Is that the door? No, not that time. Okay. So y equals, if it's going to be perpendicular, the slope is now going to be 3/2x. And then what was the rest of that? Minus 7?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, just want to make sure I heard it right. Minus 7. Okay, guys. The y-intercept does not matter at all. It is only the slope. So looking at these two slopes, can you tell me what happens between them? They flip. And they change signs. One's positive, one's negative. Which means, in order for lines to be perpendicular, they must have what's called opposites. That means if one's positive, the other's got to be negative. If one's negative, the other's got to be positive. They are also reciprocals. Guys, that's a fancy name for saying that it flips. Okay? That's what you do with a fraction when you turn it over. It's called a reciprocal. So it's opposite reciprocal slopes. Guys, you have to make it negative if it was positive. You have to make it positive if it was negative. You have to flip it over to whatever it was. If it was 2/3, now it's got to be 3/2. Opposite reciprocal slopes. Okay, based on that rule, well, first of all, let me ask you another question before you do that. When you have a whole number, you know it can really be a fraction, right? What is 7 really over? 7/1. So when you do the opposite reciprocal of that, what would it be? Negative 1/7. You got the reciprocal, but you got to change the sign. Negative 1/7. Good. For the next one, it starts as negative 2/5. So if I want to do the opposite reciprocal of that, 5/2. And it is positive. You're correct. Alright, now guys, if you have a slope of 0, what kind of line is that? Hoi. And if you want something that is perpendicular to a hoi line, then you're going to need a Buck's line, which got to go this way. And what is the slope of any Buck's line? Undefined. Guys, it says it down here. Vertical and horizontal lines are always going to be perpendicular to each other. Always. We already dealt with the fact that if you have 2 of one or 2 of the other, they'll be parallel. If you have 1 of each, they're always perpendicular. Okay, turn it over. Let's do some examples. I think I've got a couple examples with perpendicular, and then I've got the stuff where we go through and talk about whether they're parallel or perpendicular. Okay, guys, here we go. So, we're starting off on this problem. We need to write it in slope-intercept form through this point, and it's got to be perpendicular to this equation. The only problem is this equation is in what form? Whoa. Standard form. That's the other half of this test, guys. Standard form. You need to know that. It is in standard form. So, standard form. So, standard form can't give us a slope. In order to get a slope, we need to change it to slope-intercept. So we are going to minus 7x, because we need to make it y equals mx plus b. We're going to cancel this out. We're going to get negative 2y equals negative 7x. And guys, since the 3 is positive, what do you put in front of the 3? Plus 3. I need to divide everything by negative 2 to get the y. Guys, the whole goal is to make it y equals mx plus b. I got to have the y all by itself. That's the whole goal of solving it, is to get it to y equals mx plus b. So, guys, a negative divided by a negative is a positive. So that would be 7/2x minus, because a positive divided by a negative is a negative, and then it'd be 3/2. What is the only number that I care about in that entire problem? The slope or the 7/2 is correct. Both those answers are right. That's the only thing I care about. Guys, if the slope of this is 7/2 and I need it to be perpendicular, what is the slope of the new line going to be?
Negative 2/7.
Perfect. Negative 2/7. Okay. So I now have my point and my slope. If I have a point and a slope, I'm going to start in point slope form. So here it goes. Y, since this right here is a negative 1, it's going to be plus 1 equals my slope of negative 2/7 times x, and since this is a 4 right here, we're going to write it as minus 4. Just plugging in the point slope. Does anybody have any questions? All right, let's solve it. This is the stuff from your last test. Multiply across, y plus 1 equals negative 2/7 times x is just negative 2/7 x. Now the next part, grab your calculator, guys. When you get there, grab your calculator. You need to make sure you can do the ones with calculator problems. Alright, type negative 2 fraction button 7, negative 2 fraction button 7 times negative 4 equals. It's going to give you a mixed number. You're going to have to hit second fraction button equals. It should give you, when you're done, positive 8/7. Does anybody need me to go through typing that again? Yes. Okay, clear it out. Clear it out. It's going to be negative, not the minus sign, the negative sign, negative 2 fraction button 7 times negative 4 equals, on the calculator right now it should say it should say positive 1 1/7. So you hit second fraction button equals. Got it now? Good deal. Don't clear it. Leave it there. Then we are going to minus 1 from both sides. That's going to make it y equals negative 2/7 x. And you already have this in the calculator. Just hit minus 1 equals. It should give you, I think it's 1/7.
It's 1/7.
Yep. There you go. Alright. Now guys, this is the answer to the question. This is what they're looking for. And how is this one related to this one? How are the two lines related to each other? Because they're going to ask you this. They're going to be perpendicular. That's the whole point, guys. They got to be perpendicular. Which all that stuff you were saying was right. They got opposites. They're opposites. They got reciprocal. Yes, but they are perpendicular to each other. That's the key. You're trying to make them perpendicular to each other. Good. Questions, concerns, anything? Got another one, guys. These perpendiculars harder for people to absorb, so I got another one just like that. Then we'll do the special cases. Here we go. The other one for perpendicular looks like this. We want it to go through the point 0, 6. Before we do anything else, before we talk about solving this or do anything, guys, tell me what's special about 0, 6, because it is special and you can make your life easier. It is your what? It's your y-intercept. What do we call that? Y equals mx plus b, the b at the end of that, it's the y-intercept. That is what it is. It's the y-intercept, but it's also called your b. So we can go straight to slope-intercept form, the y equals mx plus b, because we have the b and we can find the slope. Here we go, guys. Let's solve this. Ooh, guys, look at this problem. It's not even in standard form. Why isn't this considered standard form? Y's are and x's are in the wrong place. You see they're switched? You'd have to rearrange them to actually call it standard form. Doesn't matter. We're just going to solve it anyway. Minus 5x minus 5x. It's going to make it 2y equals negative 5x plus 2. Does everybody understand why the 2 is positive? Got a plus in front of it. Divide everything by 2. That gives you y equals negative 5/2 x plus what? 1. 1. What is the only number that I care about in this whole thing, though?
Negative 5/2.
The slope, negative 5/2, those are all correct. And if the slope is negative 5/2 and we want it to be perpendicular, the key is knowing whether you want it parallel or perpendicular, guys. If we want it perpendicular, what's the new slope going to be? 2/5, 2/5, doesn't matter. So here's my slope in my b. So I can write it as y equals what? 2/5 x, because that's my slope, and then plus 6. That's my answer. And this line is what to this line? It's perpendicular. Now guys, listen to me. If you forget on test day that this is the b and you just do it in point slope form, just watch. Don't write this down. If you wrote y minus 6 equals, and then you have 2/5 times x minus 0, and then you solve it by distributing, it'd be y minus 6 equals 2/5 x, because 2/5 times 0 just cancels out. And then you add 6, lo and behold, look, you get the exact same answer. Is this one easier? Yes. Do they give you the same answer? Yes. You can do it either way. Both are correct algebra. One's just a lot easier than the other. If you recognize this as B, your life will be better. Okay, guys. Last of the ones with the equations are going to deal with the special cases. And this, everybody thinks they got it right until the second one is tricky, guys. The second one is, the way they ask this question is going to be the way somebody asked a question on the EOC. So I want to make sure you're prepared for this. Okay, we need an equation of a line that is perpendicular to this line, y equals -3. Guys, if it's a y line, what kind of line is that? It's a hoy. Okay, and we need it to be perpendicular to a hoy. If it's going to be perpendicular to a hoy, what kind of line is that going to be? Bucks. Which means it's going to be what letter equals a number? X. And what's the x in the ordered pair? 1. You just did it. Okay, on the next one, it asks you to write an equation of a line that is parallel, so go in the same direction, to the y-axis. Oh, okay. Let me draw, just so you see this. This is the x-axis, this is the y-axis. If it's going to be parallel to the y-axis, it's going to have to go this way. What kind of line goes this way? What kind of line goes this way? Bucks. A bucks line, which means if it's going to have to be a bucks line, it's going to have to be what letter equals a number? X. And what's the x in this ordered pair? Now, a lot of people are going to see parallel and see y right here and think this is a hoy line. But do y'all understand the y-axis is actually a bucks line? It messes with people's brains because the letters don't match. It's because every single time on this line, the x is the same amount. Okay, x is 0 up and down, all the way up and down that. So it's a bucks line. Even though it's the y-axis, it is a bucks line. So you have to be careful. So be careful on that one. Yes, ma'am?
So if you get a question like this,
I would draw a picture. If you get anything that says y-axis or x-axis, draw a picture. Because then you can decide, do you want it to go the same direction as that for parallel, or do you want it to go the opposite direction because it's perpendicular? And then once you do that, you'll know whether you want a hoy or bucks line. That's my suggestion. Anybody else? Very good question. Okay, last thing then, guys. We need to decide if these lines are parallel, perpendicular, or neither. Neither, however you say it. Okay, what is the only thing we care about when we're looking for lines to be parallel, perpendicular, or neither? It is their slope. In this first one, it is in slope-intercept form, and the slope is 1/3. The second equation, though, is in standard form. In order to get a slope, we have to solve it. To do that, we're going to minus 2x minus 2x. That makes it -6y equals, guys, what do we put in front? -2x minus 5 because it was negative. Then we have to divide everything by -6 because there can't be anything in front of my y to be slope-intercept form. Alright, now guys, a negative divided by a negative is a positive. And what does 2/6 reduce to? 1/3. You have a calculator, do it tight. 2 fraction mark 6 equals. 2 fraction mark 6 equals. Then a negative divided by a negative is a positive, and guys, 5/6 doesn't reduce. But really doesn't matter because what's the only number I care about in that whole problem? So, if they're both 1/3, then what are the lines? Parallel. Those lines are parallel because they have the exact same slope. Okay, on the next one, they are both already in slope-intercept form. This is one of the most missed problems on the next test. I'm warning you ahead of time. I'm telling you to highlight this one, do something so you know it. Are these parallel, perpendicular, or neither?
No, they're
Neither.
perpendicular.
Could be perpendicular if you put the 1 over there.
Actually, no.
Neither because they're
It's
both
neither
negative.
because they're both negatives.
A couple of y'all got it.
Look at me.
The problem is they are reciprocals of each other, but they are not opposites of each other. In order for lines to be perpendicular, one has to have a positive slope, one has to have a negative slope. These do not. They are reciprocals, but they're not opposite reciprocals, so these are I love how everybody says it different. Neither, neither. Okay, on the next one, guys, what kind of line has just an X? A Vux line. And what kind of line has just a Y? Hoy. And then if you have a Vux line and a Hoy line, what will they be to each other? Perpendicular. Perpendicular. Does anybody have any concerns, questions, anything about it? Wonderful. Take that then, please. Put that in your bags. We're going to get you your assignment. Well, you can put it in your folder. And let's get you working.